Hi, this is Jason with Banna Properties, and today I want to talk to you about how to dig a well on my land. Maybe you own a piece of land, maybe you have a piece of land that you haven't really done anything with and you've been curious about this, or maybe you're actually in the process of trying to do it. Maybe you're looking to buy land, and in many states in the US you can get affordable land, but the problem is you need water. Obviously we need water to live. There are actually many places, even in desert areas, where the land isn't worth much, but if it has a well, its value is increased quite a bit for living purposes, even for farming and gardening purposes. So how do I go about digging a well on my land? So the first thing that you need to do if you own a piece of property and you're thinking about having a well dug or digging a well or even looking into a do-it-yourself option is you need to determine the depth of your water table. Okay, so underground water source or aquifers are all over the United States, and we call that in general terms the water table. So different places have different depths of water table. As a general rule, usually lower valleys, riverbeds, things like that will have a higher water table. Oftentimes in the states in the southeast, they have a very high water table and sandy soil. And some of the more mountain and rocky areas will have a much lower water table, meaning you have to dig a lot deeper. Technically, you can dig and find water if you dig deep enough, but it could be so costly, it would not be a cost-effective solution. So you need to determine the depth of your water table. There's a little picture here of what a water table looks like. How do you go about doing that? So one of the simple things would be to ask neighboring landowners the depths of their wells. So if you know anyone in the area and you have friends that are neighbors that have wells, or you see someone in the area with wells, reach out to them and just simply ask them, how deep is your well? Most people will know the depth of their well, and generally if they put the well in, because usually the drilling of a well is paid by the depth. So they might tell you it's 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet. In the Midwest, it's very common. In the Midwestern states, in the woodland states, it's very common to have to dig 300 feet. In some places in the South, you can only have to dig 20, 30, 40 feet and find water. So ask landowners if you have any neighbors. That would be the quickest source to get a general idea of the depth of your water table. Another way would be to measure the depth of local wells. So if you actually have a neighbor or someone in the area who you're friends with who has a well, you could measure the depth of that. You can use a string with a weight on it and actually drop it down in slowly into the well until it gets wet or it hits the water depth. They have tools that are designed to do this as well, but you can do it yourself with a little bit of ingenuity. Then you'd pull it out and you obviously measure the depth of it, and you'll know specifically how deep the water table is in your area. Probably one of the best solutions, if you don't want to go out and play around and try to find a well and measure it yourself, is to call up a local well driller. They will know because this is what they do for a living, and most likely they've dug wells in your area, and just tell them your neighborhood or the area where your property is located and say, have you done any work in that area? Sure, I have. What was the average well depth? Now, it's going to vary from spot to spot, as you can see in our picture here. If you're up on the hill or if you're down in the valley, there are different aquifer depths. But if you talk to a local well driller, they will be a great source of information for this. And then the final and probably the most costly way to do this would be to use an electric or acoustic probes on site. You'll most likely need to get an engineer to come out to your property and use electric acoustic probes and actually probe the depth of your water table, which will give you an idea before you spend tens of thousands of dollars to dig a well of how deep it is and if it's a feasible thing to do. So let's talk about types of wells now. We're talking about how to dig a well on your property, on your land. So what are the types of wells? There are three simple types of wells that a person could dig on their property. The first one is an artesian well. This is very common in third world countries. It's literally artisan in that it's done yourself, done by hand. It still is used, this method, to dig wells all over the world, and quite literally, most of the first 100 years of the development of the United States, almost all wells were dug in this manner, in this fashion. So it can be done. Now, what are the pros and cons of this? Obviously, it's a ton of work. You're going to be shoveling and using a pickaxe as you go down. Another thing is it can be very dangerous. The ground can collapse and trap and kill you. So you want to look into safety devices. In this particular picture, it doesn't look like safety is his main concern. Another thing is that the water table needs to be fairly high. You're not going to dig a 200-foot deep well like this. This typically is done with 30, 40, 50 feet deep wells. And then the well has to be cased. Usually they would lay brick. In some places they still dig like this, and they use concrete cylinders. The second type is a sand point well. What's a sand point? Well, in certain areas of the US, especially in the southern states where there's a high water table and sandy soil, a sand point can be the easiest way to dig a well. Especially if you own property near a river bottom or in a flat, low valley and there's a high water table. A sand point is exactly what you see in this picture. It's a point, it has a sharp point, and then it has many holes on it in a piece of steel. This is hooked to a casement pipe and is driven underground into the sandy soil where the water is, and infiltrates in the alluvial sands into this and then creates a water pressure. It's actually very effective. You could find some videos on YouTube about this. They drive it down by hand. Many times people will dig a small hole and then they'll put a piece of pipe on like this guy and actually spin and push that sand point down and into the soil. And these, if the water table is high enough and you're in the proper area, these can actually produce quite a good flow in gallons per minute of water, and fairly clean water in sandy regions. So definitely a great option to look into. And then the final and probably the most common option is a casement well. Now, casement well is what we think of when we hire a well driller. This is the well that thousands and tens of thousands of people are using to drink water every day, to shower in their homes in rural areas where there is no city water. Usually a casement well will have a protruding casement with a well seal on top sticking out of the ground. In areas that freeze, the pipe will not be coming out the top like this picture. It'll actually come out underground, but it will stick out of the ground, and that's so that you can access it and you can work on it. And then this is a casement well because it's cased. It actually has a pipe casing that goes all the way to the bottom. And this is something that you would hire someone to drill. So here's a picture of a drilling operation and a drilling rig. And you can see on the trailer here that they have the actual casings. And as they drill, they then force in the casings, which is steel pipe. The bottom pipes have holes in the sides of them so the water can filter in. And once this is drilled and cased, you will have to actually put in a pump, and usually it's a submersible well pump. So the picture here that's hanging is a submersible well pump. It won't be just a couple feet underground like in this picture. Usually these wells are 100 to 300 feet deep, and that submersible well pump will be way down near the bottom of that. There's a pipe that runs all the way up to pump the water out. There's a wire that goes down for that, and they always have a safety rope too in case the wire breaks or the pipe breaks. You can pull the pump out and recover it. So this is a casement well. Now, an important thing to look into is water rights and permits. So before you go to dig a well on your property, you need to figure out if you have water rights. Some states, you buy property and you don't necessarily own water rights. You need to buy them separately. Other states, like Texas, you do have water rights, but not necessarily commercial water rights. So for a residential use, for your own personal use, your home, a little bit of your garden, and your washing, you can make a small casement well that will produce up to a certain amount of gallons per minute. But if you want to do a commercial well for a farming operation, you would have to have different permits and water rights and permissions. So the simplest way to find out this and to get started is to call the county building department where your property is located in, or if it exists, the water district. Oftentimes there's a county water district, and you can do a quick Google search and find this, and give them a call and ask them, what are the permits needed? What do I need to get started? In Texas, I own a property in Culbertson County, Texas, and the only thing you need there is to pay a $100 permit and you're good to go. Other counties and other states, you oftentimes even have to pay a yearly fee or permit to use and keep the well. Sometimes there's inspections. So you need to call them and coordinate with them and get the legal permits and permissions. Like I said, you need to determine if you have water rights on a state-to-state basis. You need to look into that when you buy your property. And then pay any permit fees pertaining to getting permission. Then you're going to begin to dig. Now, however you dig, whether you put in a sand point, you try to do an artisanal well yourself, or you're having a well driller come, you need to check for underground utilities and wires before you dig. Oftentimes there's a 1-800 number in your state that you can call, and you simply call them. For instance, in the state of Missouri, you call Julie. 1-800-DIG-RIGHT, you call Julie, and within 24 to 48 hours, usually they'll come out and they will check for underground wires, high voltage, pipes, cable, different things like that. Don't think that there are no underground wires just because you have a piece of vacant land or country land. There could be a gas line under there. There could be something that could potentially be very dangerous for the person digging, or very costly to repair if it was broken. So make that call. It's actually the law. You need to do that and have that marked before you dig. Thank you for watching this video today. I hope that this information helps you with developing your property or learning how to dig a well on your land.